officially enter World War II until December 8th, 1941. But the war had already been going on since September of 1939. So when America officially joined the war, so many civilian aircraft were quickly transferred into military service, and the C-47 was one of those amazing aircraft. If you were in the Navy during World War II, you called this aircraft an R-4D. The British called it the Skytrain. And a matter of fact, its history is absolutely amazing. As you heard me mention earlier, that General Dwight D. Eisenhower, commander of Allied forces in World War II, listed 7 things he thought were the top reasons why we won World War II. The C-47 was number 2 on his list. Again, getting supplies and information where it's got to go is vital to any ground campaign. And this aircraft is one of those that got the job done, getting supplies, getting personnel into the war zone. Matter of fact, thousands of paratroopers, hundreds and thousands of pounds of cargo. This aircraft still goes strong today. They actually have a program, a company that will allow to modify a C-47. They'll put turboprops, replace the radial engines, rebuild the airframe to 0 time, and a C-47, the DC-3 with turboprop engines are flying around the world today. They're amazing, still going strong. An aircraft, you've got to realize.
Okay, I'm going to be quiet, make a video. Here we go.
1930s and 40s, and because of its amazing design, rugged availability, incredible performance, the aircraft still is flown around the world today. The P-40 Warhawk, into the skies one more time, ladies and gentlemen. This classic aircraft from World War II, one of the most iconic aircraft from World War II. Of course, that distinctive tiger shark mouth painted on the front. Absolutely amazing, of course, made famous by the American volunteer group. They're known as the Flying Tigers. The C-47 lifting off, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the C-47. The DC-3 will note the distinctive black and white stripes painted on the fuselage and wings. These black and white stripes were indicative of aircraft that were Allied, used in the Normandy invasion in June of 1944. There were so many aircraft in the air, it was very difficult many times to determine who was friend or foe. So these black and white stripes were painted on our aircraft, so anti-aircraft gun from ships wouldn't fire at these aircraft. And of course, if the enemy did show up, we knew exactly who he was. He didn't have black and white stripes on the aircraft. The aircraft you see flying today are a part of the American Airpower Museum Warbird aircraft that for over 90 years, the current home of the American Airpower Museum at Republic Air Force was established as Fairchild Flying Field, and its aircraft manufacturing added to the Farmingdale aircraft to a long legacy of people, places, and companies that would make New York's Long Island the cradle of American aviation. Today, no American aviation museum with such a unique squadron of operational Warbird aircraft and has more appropriate setting for its time. On display in and around the same hangars and flying off the very same runways that dispatch Thunderbolts and the United States Air Force's
we'll get something after the show. What could we do? What could you get?
Allows the public to immerse in the history of
when we do that, as close to when the Thunderbirds are performing.
Founded in 2000 to the gracious and hard work of our founder, Mr. Jeff Klayman, this family and the incredible dedication and help of then New York State Governor George Pataki bring aviation history to life to honor our veterans. The legacy of local aviation pioneers, the men and women who built and flew the aircraft, and
here it comes, here it comes.
And the arsenal of democracy through the 20th century and today. Ladies and gentlemen, the P-40 Warhawk. Curtis P-40 Warhawk fighter was manufactured by Curtis Aircraft Company in Buffalo, New York, through its entire production run from 1939 until 1944, and first flew in 1938. An improvement on the Curtis P-46. The P-40 was one of the first fighters to incorporate an inline liquid-cooled V-12 motor, which replaced the radial engine of most common fighter aircraft. From your right, the C-47. This weekend, in honor of the 75th anniversary of the service and sacrifice of the crews of the 9th Troop Carrier Command and named to the markings of D-8, flown by the 439th Troop Carrier Group on D-Day. The aircraft also
They're the Texans taxi band. What are they part of? Warbird Thunder.
1944, jumped from C-47s, just like the one that you see here today. Once again, get your cameras ready, ladies and gentlemen, as approaching from the right the P-40 Warhawk. The P-40 you see here today was delivered to the United States Army Air Force in 1943 as a P-40M and will be transferred to the Royal Canadian Air Force that same year. While the RCAF service, this P-40 was used as a Western Air Defense Sector aircraft. The same sound of that Allison engine on the P-40 Warhawk. Again, one of the few aircraft that actually fought from the beginning of World War II all the way to the end. All right, Air Force historians out there who may or may not know, who's the first to put a shark mouth on the P-40? You can't answer. You already know. You're from the museum. The museum doesn't count. Anybody up here know? Anybody know who? Not you either. You're from the museum too. You know. All right. Who knows who first put the shark mouth on the P-40? Wasn't the Flying Tigers, believe it or not. It was the British. The British did it in North Africa. Actually put the shark's mouth on there first. Of course, the P-40 Warhawk, the Flying Tigers made it famous. The C-47, once again, the distinctive black and white stripes, you can see them very clearly on this amazing aircraft. Again, the DC-3, the C-47. The C-47 you see here today was produced in 1944 and delivered to the United States Army Air Force and would be transferred to the RAF after its arrivals in England in April of 1945. It would service with the RAF through 1949, and records and photographs document its participation in the Berlin airlift. Similar to the C-54 we have here today that also participated in the Berlin airlift. If you want to learn more about it, go inside the C-54. It's a little flying museum with information about the Berlin aircraft, Berlin airlift, and how the C-54 played a big part in that, along with the C-47. This aircraft was in combat in the 1950s during the Indochina War.
Warbird Thunder did perform. Saw Bob Schmeddle.
Yeah, saw Bob too.
What did you do with your phone?
It was only retired finally in 19.
I actually made a video of Rooster.
You made a video of it?
Yep, I did.
What you're seeing here today.
All I do is post that.
But even aircraft history, as again, this aircraft, again, originally manufactured in 1944, stayed in military service until 1986. This aircraft was acquired by the American Airpower Museum in the early 2000s and has become a regular at Airshow circuit. As a matter of fact, you can actually see this aircraft on several TV shows and movies, ABC's Pan Am, NBC's Blacklist, CBS's Bull and Madam Secretary. This aircraft has appeared on all those television shows. The aircraft is honored to have flown a real-life band of brothers, the 101st Airborne veterans Bill and Forrest Ruth in 1904.
There's our P-40 Warhawk landing.
Touching down, again made famous by the Flying Tigers. The P-40 again was not an aircraft that had the great performance that was necessary to be a top-line fighter, but it was so rugged and loved by so many pilots, they continued to fly the P-40 again throughout World War II from the beginning till the end. The P-40 again powered by a V12 liquid-cooled engine, producing 1,240 horsepower. The P-40 has a wingspan of 37 feet, a max speed of 334 miles an hour. It was armed with 6.
See someone down the end of the runway.
And can carry up to 2,000 pounds of bombs.
The Hornet's ready.
The P-40 first saw combat with the British squadrons in the deserts of North Africa during the combat starting in June.
See him way down there at the end of the runway.
Made one of its biggest contributions in the southeast against the Japanese in the South Pacific. The P-40 actually performed surprisingly well as a fighter. based on wartime victory claims, over 200 Allied pilots became aces. That's shooting down at least 5 enemy aircraft.
Panchito coming up.
200 Allied fighter pilots became aces in the P-40. Some became double aces. During the attack on Pearl Harbor, most of the P-40s were destroyed on the ground. However, a few managed to get into the air and shoot down several Japanese aircraft. The first confirmed victory by the United States Army Air Force unit over a German aircraft in World War II was achieved in August of 1942 by a P-40. The famous 99th Fighter Squadron, better known as the Tuskegee Airmen or the Red Tails, flew the P-40 for their first 8 months in the Mediterranean theater of operation. The versatile P-40 would serve until finally being retired from military service by the Brazilian Air Force in 1958. Inbound for landing, the C-47. Again, an amazing aircraft, ladies and gentlemen. The C-47, again, a workhorse of World War II that has kept going and going and going. And again, you heard me mention earlier, still being flown all around the world today. The history, the sights and sounds of World War II, ladies and gentlemen, it's just absolutely amazing to watch aircraft that were designed, built, flown 80 years ago, still going strong. As a matter of fact, a lot of these aircraft, if we put the guns back on them, the hard points, I guarantee you a lot of these aircraft would go back into combat and do exactly what they were designed to do 80 years ago. A big wave to the P-40 Warhawk up close. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen. Look at that beautiful piece of Army hardware. Again, during World War II, the Air Force was not a separate entity. It was a part of the Army, so that's why you hear it referred to as the Army Air Force or the Army Air Corps. The Air Force would become a separate branch of service in 1947. And interestingly enough, these aircraft, even though they were fighter aircraft, they had the letter designation P, not F, but P. Now the P stood for pursuit aircraft. That's the way these aircraft were originally designated, not as fighters, but as pursuit aircraft. So that's why you get the designation P-40, P-48, P-48, P-47.